Hello and welcome to the Game Changer series of interviews in support of Global Entrepreneurship Week 2016. This is in association with Business Crowd, and today I'm delighted to be interviewing Sharon Jackson from the European Sustainability Academy. Welcome, Sharon.
Hello, Laura.
And just share with our listeners today a little bit about you and a little bit about what you're going to be speaking about today.
Okay, well, firstly, it's just lovely to be here in the UK in autumn. I'm just really enjoying these beautiful colours here across the UK. Aren't we lucky to live here at this time of the year? And I say that because mostly I live and run my business in Crete. And I built the European Sustainability Academy in Crete as an immersive experiential learning location for people who want to set up and are running their own businesses, and also leaders in corporations. And I built this because after 16 years of teaching, lecturing, and researching in sustainable enterprise, I was very underwhelmed by how much was actually being done. I built the European Sustainability Academy as an immersive learning experience. And what I wanted to share with your listeners today are three key findings and experiences that I've had since I built ESA in 2011. And I want to cover a bit about how we make sense of sustainable enterprise. What is sustainable enterprise and how we make sense of that? What are we noticing and what are we deselecting in our sense making around sustainable enterprise? And then what's our anchor for the doing of sustainable enterprise? I was disillusioned, to say the least, by what hasn't been happening in the 16 years I've been teaching sustainable business. So what is our anchor? How do we find it? How do we know when we've got it? And thirdly, what I've found even more so over the last 3 or 4 years is finding the clusters of other people with that similar anchor that helps us to enact sustainable practices in our businesses.
Yeah, because in any business you can't do it alone. You've got to think about the whole supply chain and the people that you're working with, so that's very important. So really looking forward to hearing what you're going to share with us today. So on the first point about sustainability, what is it? It's a buzzword. It's something that people speak about very frequently in business. But as you say, the reality and how that translates into how we see business being done, is it more than an accreditation and a mark? What does true sustainability mean to you?
Well, you see, what you've just said is part of the problem. It's an abused and overused buzzword, but the truth is it's a very, very important impact on all of us across the world. And what's happened is I'm actually quite tired of all the opinion pieces and the bragging on Facebook and social media about people talking about what they're doing for sustainability. The point is, it's not a report, Laura. It's not about writing. It's not about talking and speaking. It's about doing. It's about changing our behaviours. To create a more sustainable world. Okay, the broad understanding about sustainability in business is that the businesses do good by the environment, the communities, and they make money. Those are the three basic principles of sustainability in business. And I'll give you an example of making sense of sustainability from my own academic research and my own practical research is around groups of people who talked about the principles and really the navel-gazing of is it a buzzword or is it real? We're kind of beyond that now. Climate change is all around us, for one example of sustainability. The world is in a mess, a frightful mess. And one of the examples is, from my own research, is people talking about turning off the lights because they're using too much energy. And then in that research conversation, them actually saying, in 5 years' time, one of us will turn the lights off. Well, that's what I mean about sense making. Why have they deselected in their thinking about turning those lights off today? And so we're almost caught up in a detachment from our natural environment, a very big detachment from doing things today and making the change.
We see this in policy making, don't we? Time after time, though, when targets are set, and every time a target's set, it's for 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future, and then those deadlines come and go.
Precisely, Laura. And you know, people interview me all the time around the world about things like the COP21, Sustainable Development Goals, and I'm a bit snippy about them, frankly. I go, yeah, what again? Another. I was in Sydney in 2000 during Kyoto discussions, and I am completely disillusioned about the lack of impact of those policies reporting. And you know, it's no secret that most sustainability reports aren't written by the organisations. They're written by marketing groups and other groups. They're not written by the people inside the organisations. So the light example is a very good one, because those people were in an organisation where they had a policy that said they're there to reduce their energy. And still, they're sense-making, so they're not linking in their mind with making the action today.
Mm.
It's something that you can write in your report, but not actually doing the doing. So my first comment is about noticing your sense-making. In terms of entrepreneurs and smaller enterprise, what does sustainability mean? And I'll give you an example of adaptation for the sustainability challenges, notably climate change. I live and work in Crete most of the year, and the olive oil production is vital to that economy, absolutely vital. And a lot of people might find it strange to hear that olive oil production is vastly environmentally damaging. Vastly. The use of water and the pollutants, it's not a very clean industry. And one of the companies we work with, Biolea, have found a process of sustainable olive oil production, cold press. They don't water their trees. They use recycled water, and all the waste goes back into fertilizer. This year in Crete, we haven't had any rain. Climate change is hitting a place like Crete absolutely enormously and affecting the enterprises. But Biolea will get a crop this year because they have already factored in sustainability understanding. Their sense-making recognised that if it doesn't rain, there won't be olive harvests. So already, quite some years ago, they started not watering their trees.
Mm-hmm. So creating a change in how that's working is obviously something that has actually translated to a positive as well, looking at the business case, bottom line impact.
Absolutely, but actually noticing, and I want to go back to this making, noticing and not deselecting that, oh, well, we'll turn the lights off in 5 years' time. You know, Biolea recognised we need to change the way we harvest, we manage our trees, our olive trees, now, not in 5 years' time. Not in 5 years' time. And I don't know if right now on the TV here in England, if people are watching, there's a programme in the Arctic Circle on one of the BBC channels with the Autumn Watch group, and they're in Churchill, Manitoba, in the Arctic Circle. I was there in 2007 as part of a climate change research project, and I remember how quite matter-of-fact and coldly the chief scientist said to us Southerners, what are you talking about? Climate change is here. What? You know, this is 2007. And we were kind of, what can we do? We, you know, stop flying. And he was kind of, it's too late, guys. You need to adapt. You need to be thinking about adapting. And what struck me, Laura, when I came back down to the south and went back to the business schools and my teaching and into businesses and told them this, they really were still of the, we'll deal with it when it really hits us. We'll deal with it sometime in the future. And watching on TV this week in Churchill, Manitoba, where I was 9 years ago, of course it's infinitely worse up there. And when you live in a place like Crete, it's infinitely worse, the impacts, and the businesses are having to adapt. So my kind of call to enterprises is up the front end, notice what is going on, don't deselect it as something to do in the future, because your enterprise will suffer, your community will suffer, and the whole sustainability chain will act now, and stop just writing about it in opinion pieces and writing, showing off things on Facebook. Get out and do something, make some changes.
Absolutely. And it is one of the things I think that's key for businesses is to be able to vision what the future is, to look at what possible scenarios might be. However, one of the things that I've observed in businesses is they're so focused, as you say, on the short term that there's almost not the thinking space to actually have those exploratory conversations that actually could make a better impact both for the planet, but for the business, for their employees, for the stakeholders in those organisations. How can businesses get better at assessing what's going on around them and making sense of the environment they're in?
Well, first of all, I'd like to comment on what you described there. The one very big problem that we have is that we silo our thinking around the environment, the community, the people, and the business. It's all the same. All the same. I don't know about you, but I don't get on a spaceship on Friday night and go to another planet. I'm
Mm.
here. Everything, my friends, my family, everything. So the first thing is to think about this whole completely integrated notion of living. And the building I built, ESA, is built on the principle of biophilia, which Edward O. Wilson wrote very extensively about in 1984, which is a psychological human orientation to be connected with the world, with the planet, the living systems. We have broken that in our businesses. We've completely disconnected our human need to be connected with the planet to this business is separate. And until that gets reconnected, we have a real problem with that sense-making understanding, because there's no anchoring in our feelings of why we should turn the lights out now and not in 5 years' time. The Biolia olive oil producers already worked that out. They're very advanced in their thinking. So how to do it? Well, my own research in very large organizations is looking at the policy, finding out what they're committing to in their reductions, whether it's part of sustainable development goals or social responsible investment, whatever the drivers are, looking at their policy, taking it to the management and at all levels, CEOs, leadership, and then the environmental teams, and asking them, say, what does that mean to them? Now, what I've found, Laura, is when there's a cultural anchor in the organization, they can all understand. So, for example, Panasonic, it would be their basic business principles, which have been inherent in Panasonic for 60, 70 years.
Mm.
If I could get the Panasonic environmental team to anchor to what they're all there and they're about, their fundamental cultural principles of their organization, from that point, they would understand why they must enact the policy. In other big businesses, where there wasn't that cultural sense of anchoring and feeling, there was no sense to make the action around the policy. So my advice to all businesses, this is not just large organizations, this is the smallest entrepreneurship enterprise, to really be sure of what that anchor is individually, personally, and then as the collective, whether it's a small collective or a large organization.
Absolutely. It's got to be connected to values both of the organisation and personally. And when people understand that and when it fits with their values, that's when they are more likely to act in line with the change that we want to see.
Well, you know, actually, in my experience, I'm actually changing slightly towards this. I used to use words like values leadership and values and morals and all those things. And yes, those are absolutely true, and a credo and a moral basis to work from. But I'm even shifting more to it's actually a feeling. It's a very specific feeling. And I had a wonderful conversation yesterday with a woman, a very, very successful woman in enterprise. And she said that many of the things we discussed yesterday would literally go through her head, and she might remember some of it. But some of the things we discussed, she felt the same way as I felt about what we're discussing.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things we remember. And I'll give another example on this, and this is where I'm coming to the anchoring being more than a headspace anchor. It's a feeling. One of the things going back into the Arctic from research in 2007, I still feel right now, even telling you the story, is that we were doing some dendrochronology work, which is taking samples from cores of trees to see how climate change is affecting the tree growth in the Arctic. And I remember the feeling of bringing out the cores from the research lab and being able to see in Manitoba, the Arctic Circle, the impact from 1991, Mount Pinatubo in Indonesia.
Mm.
I remember the feeling. I have been told that the world's connected forever. I instinctively know that and intellectually know that, but to look at it in front of me and feel that and see that stays with me as an anchor around that. So within organizations, you know, leadership's change, business management's change. Those feelings in people will make them turn the lights off now and not in 5 years' time.
Yeah, and I think it is this thing. They need to move and see and take things off of the spreadsheets and off of the reports and be more connected
You
with.
know, even the language law is very interesting. I mean, you know, I'm a British person who spends most of my life in Greece. And when you live in a country where you speak a different language, you end up speaking in a very authentic and very clear way because you have to communicate with people. There's no place for academic frills or long words, or otherwise you just don't communicate. And when I come back to England, I find that sometimes I cannot understand what people are saying. Jargon, three-letter acronyms. Just I have to say I have got, and they're throwing names around of people that I've never heard of course. And I particularly heard on the news when I first came back last week. Actually, it was in Australia, and sadly some people had died on a fairground ride. And the policeman actually said, "I'm sorry to report that 4 adult persons have sustained injuries which is not conducive to living." And I thought, why the hell did you just say, "I'm sorry to say 4 people have died"? And,
Yeah,
that is, and within businesses, and the more I've listened to this, and the more I've listened to it on the TV and the media and people I've seen in the last few weeks, I don't know how people even understand what they want each other to do, because the language has become such protective armor of
mm,
fear, frankly. It's a fear of a paralysis of not knowing how to reach those anchors, how not to make sense of what's going on, and therefore this becomes a paralysis of not enacting the doing. And therefore, to go back to one of your starting comments, people fall back to we've got a CSR report, we've got a sustainability report.
mm,
That does nothing, absolutely nothing. That makes no change.
mm. I think that thing of using oblique language, as you say, that's creating barriers to people's understanding and not.
Creating barriers. Yeah, and actually the people who are doing it to protect themselves, and it's protect themselves actually, because they also,
Stop
the
looking at the
leadership.
obvious and avoiding scrutiny sometimes as well.
I didn't hear that, sorry?
I said sometimes to avoid people looking at the obvious and trying to avoid scrutiny is how it comes across.
Totally, totally. So and it goes back what you said at your first comment is jargon. People are really mixed up about it. It's deadly serious, deadly serious. In Crete, where I live, there's no snow on the mountain. The sea has flooded the local tourist area 5 times this year, rather than once when we first got there. You know, where I've been in the Arctic, the melting of the poles is affecting places like Crete. And it's deadly serious. We have to notice it. And the deselection goes, oh, please, let's hope it goes away. Let's hope it doesn't happen. It's happening. It's
Mm,
happening. And the jargon is the protection of, oh gosh, we actually don't know what to do about it.
mm,
So the finding the anchor, noticing the sense making, and this is all size businesses. And what I'm also noticing is, I mean, going back to my third point, finding the other people who have that same anchor as you.
mm,
So yesterday the conversation I had with this other person, there were things we talked about. She felt what I was telling her. She could see it. She went, oh my goodness, that just touched me. Now, the more people we find that feel those anchors the same way, those clusters, the more likely those clusters will be able to start to enact the intention, enact the feeling. They don't speak to each other with jargon protection. It's very authentic. And my experience also now, and the more I've moved around the world and worked in India and other places, is I genuinely believe is the small clusters, the communities, it's the jam and the small farmers and the small community activities, particularly in places like Greece now, where there isn't any leadership. It's a complete dearth of any kind of leadership there, both corporate and government-wise. It's a people's movement of clusters of like-minded people with anchors who are making change. And the issues of sustainability, their enterprises are smacking them in the face every single day. They have to adapt. They absolutely have to adapt. And some are really emerging with amazing creativity and innovation. And that's another thing that's happening is that when the people do check the sense making, they do get that anchor towards action. Innovation and creativity is enormous, absolutely enormous, because you have to think of doing things in a different way, like my olive oil example of the trees in Crete.
mm, mm. And how can we bring together create the environments for those clusters to have those conversations, to look at collaborating and kind of harnessing the power that you get perhaps when you might have two very different businesses but with challenges driven by the same thing, to look at co-creating solutions.
That's a really good question. I've been sort of surfing around this for the last few years and trying to notice and watch what's going on. Of course, the kind of what you do, Laura, is absolutely typical and very, very helpful. You're bringing together like-minded people, although you're going to have a complete mix there of people, and some are going to find clusters and others are not. I can only speak from my own personal style. My personal style is I have to sit in front of a human being. Have to sit in front of them, look in their eyes, have a conversation to know if we share the sense-making, the anchors. I can't do that through social media. I find social media totally confusing very often and disconnected, and has led me up a garden path more times than I can think of. So I have to physically do that. Call me old-fashioned. I'm not a millennial. That's just the way I have to work. Although I'm finding actually that millennials also, at the end of the day, in the entrepreneurship programs that I'm mentoring on, also need that human connection.
So I'm actually going to say I'm finding that more and more as well. People are going much more locally, and people I've been speaking with, particularly with launching something locally, are in that sense of, isn't that a great idea? I'm craving local connection too. So I think actually you're seeing a moving away. Whilst the online world is useful for joining the dots, people are actually beginning to go back to having more in-person conversations and meetings to drive plans forward.
I think so, Laura. I mean, it's difficult for me because I move around a bit, and but I mean, yeah, I feel that, and even the work I say I've done in Athens with millennials who, apparently, I've never got their head out of an iPhone, which is partly true. They still want to come and physically meet me and talk to me. They want to come to Easter, actually. They want to come and feel. And that was one thing in September. We had some 3 young men, actually, young entrepreneurs, who came to Crete to the European Sustainability Academy. And they were emotionally overwhelmed by that reconnection. And I go back to the biophilia. It's about being friends with nature. It's a human need we have. And these young 20-something, 30-something young men realize what they've missed out on, and they found it very, very enriching. And the kind of comments that they wrote in my visitors book are all about the feeling of being there and the reconnectedness and re-energizing. And even things like the sky, I mean, it's slightly different to your question, but I've had people come and look at the dark night sky and see all the stars and say, oh my goodness, we'd lost the sky through light pollution and we didn't even realize it. So obviously my style is to get people together to have a shared experience, and that becomes an anchor. So if people come to my place in Crete, they see the sky, they see the olive trees, they see the animals, they smell the fresh air, which I also I notice very much when I come back to other countries. When I go back to my island in Crete, that my mountain air is very fresh there. And that is a feeling, and it's their personal experience. It's immersive. That becomes their sense-making. That becomes their anchor. If someone comes to my place and doesn't feel that, clearly I'm never going to be able to really connect with that person or work with that person. And that's fine. That's completely fine. So I suppose creating the safe spaces, I went to Cranfield, where I'm a lecturer, a few months ago to do some work there, and one of my colleagues said, Sharon, can I have a hug? Yes, of course. We had a hug. That was just lovely. And we discussed it afterwards, and she just said, there's just not enough human connectivity, not enough hugging, not enough smiles, not enough kindness. The language I already discussed, disconnected the language. How are we going to create sustainable enterprises which help our community, our environment, our planet, if we can't even connect with each other as human beings? And I hope we're right in this. I hope people are starting to go back to wanting to spend time with other human beings and not just writing in this disjointed chat-based world that we've all got used to. I hope we're right.
Yeah, I think the other thing as well is connecting with our own humanity when we're in organisations and looking at why we are or are not doing things. And it's interesting, you talk about safety and obviously the physical and the felt sense of safety, both in person and through what you've created at ESA. But obviously, I mean, I've had the privilege of coming over there with you and working there at times. And the other thing that it creates as well is that sense of psychological safety.
Yes. Well, you know, one thing I commented yesterday, it kind of like came to me. Some of these things just sit there and they come out at the right time, don't they? And one thing I commented yesterday to the person I was meeting was how many people come to Crete, ESA, and you know, it's a very, very beautiful place. It's just so peaceful, pure. It's very, very safe and beautiful. And how many people come to a conference, to a meeting, and of one of the two sofas, they just lay down. They take a little lay down, and they fall asleep into a deep, deep sleep. No one touches them. No one wakes them. And you know, Laura, it happens almost every time we run an event. And then I feel so humbled that someone can, you know, you can't make yourself more vulnerable as a human being than falling asleep in a strange place in front of strange people you don't know.
Mm.
That is quite a humbling thing for me. They feel so safe. And also recognizing how exhausted these people are.
Mm.
Emotionally exhausted, disconnected from nature, which is exhausting, disconnected from human beings and whatever else is going on in their world. And you know that at Easter we do some things, we do some little ceremonies and rituals, and in September we did the same as we usually do. People write some things, you know, they've been with us 3 or 4 days in this beautiful environment, and we have to prepare them to go back to wherever they're going back to.
Mm-hmm.
And we write down on the paper, what are we going to leave there? What do we not want to take back to create something, an anxiety, an anger, a guilt, I don't know, whatever it might be, or what we're going to change. And people write this in a very, very deep and solemn way. It's a very important process for them. And they burn this. We have lovely incense, and they burn it. And some people cry, and then they laugh, and they lighten. We watch them lighten. So not everyone can do this, but actually you can do it. You know, with a small group of people, you can do these things, or even on your own, quite honestly. You know, when you start feeling a bit disconnected, just really think about these things, write them down, and throw them away, burn them, or whatever. And I see them lighten up, and then hopefully we're sending them back a little bit more connected, you know, the more biophilia connection with nature, with the world, with a better world maybe, and showing them that actually the world can be very safe, actually. There are parts of the world that are very safe, and we can create our own safety. Cool. Did you get disconnected? Hey there. Hey there. Cut off.